Welcome, one and all, to episode 3 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast with Nick and Blaze. This week, we're talking about the opening round and our thoughts about it, and all 4 games and all 8 teams. We're also talking about round 1 and some of the upcoming games, the ones that stand out to us specifically, and maybe a little light notes across the rest of it. Some notable news about key things that happened throughout the weekend, and a little bit of a rundown on where the ladder currently sits. So please come along and hang out with us. Welcome. How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. Looking forward to answering the burning key questions of round 0, round 1. And yeah, just discussing how it all went because it's all sort of it sort of came and went, but there's enough to talk about in the little condensed, a little taster of football, we'll call it.
It's like a
Before the
practice match, but for points.
arts. I mean, kind of. I mean, the players won. Like, they're not going to do it. But I did feel like, as a watcher, it was a bit, you know, it was just on. It was nice to watch what you can. But on the flip side, like, I was busy Saturday and I went out Friday night. So I missed half of the round anyway. So it did suck if you were a bit caught up.
I
Got a
did
bit less
I did
football,
at
but
least get to watch Gold Coast Richmond, but I'm also regretting
yep.
watching Gold Coast Richmond. And
Yeah, we
I
definitely
caught
will.
some of the other games, mostly through highlights. But
I
they
guess
look
the
pretty
other
good.
Yeah, but I guess the other burning question is, will we be able to answer the question of what we did during the week? How were you? How would your week go?
Uh Pretty busy, mostly work. I got to see my friend's new place on Friday, I think it was, and it was pretty cool. Her place is so much bigger than mine. It's it's
Yeah, it's a bit of a
it's
pad.
3 stories, and her entire second floor is bigger than my entire apartment. It's pretty
Man,
daunting.
the Melbourne high
I
rises.
know, right? It's
Does she go to
wild.
the mountain ranges for a bit of skiing on the
Oh,
holidays?
if only, if only. Did you get up to
uh,
much?
a little bit. I'm actually trying to set up a few job prospects myself. Probably be set up later this month. So yeah, that's some good news there. Other than
Mm-hmm.
that, doing a bit of house sitting, wrap up on Wednesday, return back home.
Very
But
nice.
yeah, looking after the gorgeous but chunky cat. And yeah, I saw my cousin as well a couple of times, who lives right around the corner. Her 2 kids. Uh lovely, lovely young people. And yeah, as I said, had dinner with them, um, played a card game with them, had the advantage of them running off to look after their kids every 3 seconds, but you know,
Fair enough.
uh,
Fair enough.
such is parent life. Um, but yeah, apart from that, pretty good.
Excellent, excellent. Shall we get started on the opening round?
Yes, yes, and what a pretty, I'd say a pretty slow start initially in what was a very humid and you know, dour game for the first half. But we had Sydney kicking 12-14-86, defeating Melbourne 9-10, 64 at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Um, it was very greasy. The tall forwards really struggled early on.
Yep.
And I think that, especially in that first half, even though it didn't always show on the scoreboard, Sydney were a lot more creative with their entries. But what really happened was they just outmuscled Melbourne's midfielders, and that went on. Grundy nullified Gawn, and which got Sydney a few more clearances, a few more inside 50s, which brought their forwards into the game. I think on the flip side, Fritsch was really only the most consistent forward for Melbourne,
Yep, and kicked
and they were
four
just really
goals.
stagnant on. Yeah, kick 4 goals, but overall they were just really stagnant all night. Like as I said, with Sydney, they didn't have as much forwards marking inside 50, but they had a few players come up. They created a few from pressure,
Yep.
whereas Melbourne were a bit the opposite. They were just flat, really. And also, yeah, the transition game was helped by strong marking effort from Sydney. Like last year, they really got their hands on the ball. They were able to move it on their terms, especially off halfback. And an age-old question popped up again. Should Heaney be playing pure midfield? Because he was absolutely fantastic, especially in the absence of their key players, obviously being Parker, Mills, and
Taylor Adams.
oh, Taylor Adams. Thank you very much. And yeah, as for you debutants, Howes looked fantastic back for Melbourne. Helped May, especially when the very sad news of Bowie going down
Yeah,
after a
shoulder injury.
very tough shoulder on a fantastic effort. Like it was really sad. Unfortunately, not only did the effort count for nothing, but they got a goal a few minutes later. And yeah, James Jordan, obviously playing his against his old side,
Yep.
was quite disposal wise, but provided a lot of pressure, which was good, especially in the tackling department. So yeah.
I mean,
What were your thoughts on the game?
when you had Jack Viney
Oh,
doing
sorry, yeah.
most of the work with Melbourne, like he had 30 disposals, 2 goals, 7 tackles, and 7
hmm
clearances. It kind of makes sense to have one of the newer players to the side being a little bit quieter with only 18 disposals.
Yeah, it's like, as I said, it wasn't so much because I said you might say, oh, it's disappointing, but sometimes, especially with the more fringier players, it's what the effort you can provide when you're not having the best game.
Yeah.
And I think even on the flip side, there was a few Melbourne players that were very down, whether it was like the younger kids like Van Royen struggling to get into it, or
Although he
you
did
know,
produce a miracle goal.
yes, the honestly, I was amazed that a goal like that wasn't kicked by Joe Danaher. Like, it's like one of those things that is just so accidental. Like you couldn't recreate that, like if you're
Oh
trying.
no,
It
that
was just
definitely was not on
a
purpose.
blessing of the moments, but produced an absolute highlight. But yeah, as I said, he just really struggled. He could only really mark up the ground. You know, and like Petrarca too, really struggled at times. They placed him up forward, a bit like we said, when they're struggling up forward, they wanted him to make a moment, and he kicked an absolutely ripping goal out the center, a very Petrarca moment.
Mm-hmm.
But that was about it, really. And yeah, as I said, it was just like just a few too many down players for Melbourne. They weren't terrible. Um, but as I said, I think it says a lot more for Sydney this win, just the way they were meant to go about it, and especially like I said, they didn't have the forward structure early. Like Amadi played pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
McDonald, McLean. Oh, sorry, Amadi was subbed off as well.
Yes, he was.
McDonald and McLean really struggled in that first half to make any impact whatsoever. But as I said, they were just finding ways, and a player that I'll talk about in a bit, like there's one moment in the first half where Blakey had the ball in hands, and they were struggling, and he was just like, you know what, I'm not going to bomb it long to May, who was having a great game, and Bowie.
He was
I'm gonna
dominating in the air.
do yeah, I'm going to do a bit more of a riskier kick in inside 50. It's a bit of a 50-50 there, but they were able to win the ball and eventually kick a goal. And, when it was Dower and those percentage plays, the ball is not quite going to go back the other way with the same pace,
Yeah.
It was sort of smarter play to break it up, you can't do it every time, but, it was one of those moments where it was Sydney was more willing to be a bit riskier, create a bit more, and yeah, take the win.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to touch quickly back on Isaac Heaney because in total
hmm
he finished with 26 touches, 18 contested, and 13 clearances. Do
hmm
you think with the shift that they have had to make in their midfield, do you think he should stay there or should he still push forward?
They can't. Like they've committed too much as Zini as a forward, and they still need him up the ground. I think the question is, especially with their midfielders, having that rotation, is if you are going to put Heaney, maybe like 50-60%, who do you have, up forward, who can provide that pretty, marking presence and a bit more, is it like Sam Wicks or, a player like that can, really fill that gap? Because they are going to struggle. Like, Melbourne did lose a lot of defensive pressure once Bowie went down. You're not going to have that every match. Um, so yeah, it's really just it's not so much where you play Heaney, it's more again, and a bit of questions at the start of the year, how will Sydney find that consistent forward options?
Mm-hmm.
Especially yeah, with a few players that you still have a few question marks after what was still an impressive victory.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, in the eventuality that Adams and Mills and Parker end up coming back and Sydney are back at their
Hmm.
stronger form,
Yeah,
you like to hope that it would free up Heaney to be able to rotate, even with Parker for an example, because I think Parker has the height to be able to
yeah,
play forward.
exactly. Parker does. Unfortunately, throughout his career, he's had struggled probably getting as many goals as he could,
Mm.
considering his skill set. But yeah, they're two people that I think Sydney would really be wanting somewhere between 20 and 30 goals by the end of the season for, a top four run, which they proved, I think, in this game that probably on the cards just from first round form or round zero form, I should say.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, as we noted, injury to Jake Bowie. He's the only injury, thankfully. There are,
Yeah, but
I think,
a
in
really
total
big one,
across.
8 weeks.
Yeah, it's shoulders are a hard one to come back from as well.
Mm,
Shall we move on
yeah.
to Brisbane and
Just
Carlton?
quickly,
Oh yeah,
I'd
go on.
like to I just do a quick wrap up of the limelight players, which I thought were May, Viney, Heaney, and Grundy. Star players who really play big for the teams, and the spotlight players who aren't exactly A-list, but I thought provided a good role. For Sydney, I thought Blakey and Cunningham.
Mm-hmm.
Cunningham more on defense. He was providing a good marking pressure. And Blakey obviously on the wing, creating those more creative forward 50s. And for Melbourne, I think McVee played a pretty solid role as well. And Salem looked to be in good form coming back from injury,
I
a
agree.
bit more in the midfield.
I agree with Christian Salem because he regularly he's normally pushing off of halfback, but they moved him into the midfield and it looked really comfortable.
Exactly. Yeah, and as I said, he's still got a bit of pace, even though he's been hindered by injury through the years. And, his disposal's fairly well. It's just that consistency that they'll
Yeah,
be looking from.
more game time in the
But yeah,
midfield will give it to
something
him.
a bit more positive for a bit of a disappointing loss. But, I think you would shrug your shoulders at that if you're a Melbourne fan. And yeah, it's more just that forward line structure that they'll really be worrying about.
It's something that they'll work on, but they should be all right in the long term.
Exactly. You give
Bris,
him a bit of time.
yeah. Brisbane and Carlton.
Hmm.
What a game!
Um,
What a quarter!
I know. I mean, as I said, you will take the lead on this one because I wasn't able to watch it because I said I went out to the family dinner. They are kids. They had it at 5:30, and when I went off, it was I think about 12 to 50 odd, and I just thought, well, one of the games that I could probably miss out on,
Ah,
a bit
clearly not.
unfortunate for Carlton,
Clearly
and
not.
then ooh. Exactly, and I'll let you take the lead of what exactly happened in that game
Well,
because,
I'll start with
yeah,
the scoreline with 12-13-85 to 13-8 86 with Harry Mackay kicking the clutch goal in the final minutes.
one of the
It was
bigger talking
Brisbane's
points.
first loss at the Gabba since 2022, right before the final
Hmm.
series of that season. And Carlton first time winning at the Gabba since 2013 after trailing by 46
Wow.
points.
Yeah.
Charlie Kerner and Harry Mackay combined for a total of 7 goals won, 7 contested marks, and 24 disposals in total. So they were really doing a lot of work in the forward line,
Hmm.
taking a lot of marks and bringing the ball to ground if they couldn't mark it themselves. I thought that Carlton's midfield was really, really strong, with George Hewitt getting 27 disposals and 5 clearances, Adam Chara with 25 disposals and 7 clearances, Captain Patrick Cripps with 23 touches, and Blake Acres with 22 touches and 5 clearances. So they were just bolting out of the midfield as soon as they could get their hands on it.
Yeah, and especially against Brisbane, who are known for just dominating the clearances, which again they did early, but Carlton were pretty impressive to fight back in that regard.
Well, Lachie Neale led from the front, as he always does. He had 25
Yeah.
touches of his own, with 5 clearances and 5 inside 50s. And Joe Danaher taking one of the marks of the year already in the opening round.
Yep, yeah. That
But
was great.
Hugh McCluggage looked really good, as he always does.
Mm.
I thought a lot of Brisbane's younger players looked really, really strong as well. But it's just getting a lot more experience into them. We be able to clutch out of tight games such as this.
Yeah,
But I also
for
think
sure.
that the key injury to Keaton Coleman is also what cost them, because he plays a massive role in their structure. Because he's the one
Yeah,
that took
you
over from
don't.
Daniel Rich.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you don't want to say that, oh, they only lost because of X, you know, especially early in the season. Like, it's such a big and disheartening injury. You know what I mean? It just, you know, you don't want to say it sparked the whole comeback because obviously Carlton put in a
No,
lot of effort to get back into it.
no, I agree.
But it's just one of those things where it's hard to restructure when, it's a player that a lot of Brisbane love as well, he's a
Yeah.
good personality and, it's just one of those injuries, especially so early on in the season. It's really tough and we won't see him again this year. Full blown ACL. And yeah, it's just what can Brisbane do to try and replace that?
The other major point of note is Sam Doherty, doing his own ACL.
Yeah,
Third one in his career.
exactly.
I did put this in the
Him,
notable news sort of thing to talk about a bit later on, but I'll bring it up now.
yeah,
Is this
exactly.
is this ACL the one that ends his career?
Man, there's been a few players that I've thought have been ruled out, like what do you call it? Liberatore is
Yeah.
someone who has just been able to keep on coming back. And I think when you got a player of Doherty's toughness, you can't exactly rule it out, but it's going to be hard at his age,
No,
as I said, his speed is done.
his early
Like,
30s.
he's
It's
playing,
really hard.
yeah, he's playing purely off disposal, which is well enough. And, he's got players around him that might make up. Obviously, another one who's a bit injury prone, but
Mm-hmm.
came back in a good force that might help him is Zach Williams for Carlton.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, as I said, it's hard. And, it's sad to see him go. But as I said, if Carlton can be that finals performing side for not just this year, but next year, I think they'll be looking to see, if they can get him back on the park. But it wouldn't surprise me if that was, unfortunately, his last game. You hope not, but
We
it's
all
always
hope not,
concerning.
but you never know.
No,
That's the scary thing with
exactly.
ACLs, because they're the longest injury to come back from, apart
The
from back
longest injury to come
injuries.
off with. And, as I said, some players just can't get that. And it's also mental, when you're running and you felt that just go, that burst of speed could feel like your last, especially for Doherty, who's a game breaker, an organizer. He wants a bit of dash when he can, you know. It's just hard. And I hope for his sake he's able to come back. But yeah, again, two players that really just gutted.
Yeah, it's
You
just
know,
really
for them to
heartbreaking.
come back for. Yeah. I think Coleman probably has a few less similar type players to try and replace. Obviously the substitution. Kyle Lohman, young player for Brisbane, plays a similar role. He's got the pace for it, but he needs to work on his ability to get the ball and what he does with it
Yep.
to really be the full term replacement. They'll be looking elsewhere probably. But yeah, so Lellman probably works his way into the interchange bench. they'll look to see who they have coming back and restructure a bit.
Is there any other notes we need to make on that game before we move on?
Probably not. Yeah, as I said, it's just one of those ones where for Carlton especially, what we said was a tough start to their list, and it was one of the things where we thought that might be holding them back. Winning against Brisbane at the Gabba is huge for their season.
Absolutely.
It might be opening the door for top four. If they can still have that consistency that they did at the end of last year.
Yep, I agree. Shall we move on to Gold Coast versus Richmond?
Yep.
A game that I'm
And
not
I guess
really
I'll
looking
let you.
forward to talking about.
No, it was a bit, especially early on. It was looking to be very dire, but Richmond ended up coming back. I'll let you run through the score.
I'll admit, I was pretty impressed with what we came out with in the third quarter. I thought we looked really, really good. We looked fast. We looked like the Richmond that we should be, and not the Richmond that
Yeah,
was for the other 3 quarters of this game.
exactly. Yeah.
But the scoreline was 14-15, 99 to 9-6, 60. As everyone's probably already well aware by now, Matt Rowell absolutely dominated the game. 33
Clearance
disposals
breaking record.
and clearance breaking record of 20 clearances in total. Ben King, Malcolm Roses, and Jack Lukosius combined for 10-3 in scoring, which completely outscores Richmond as a whole already.
Yeah,
Those three single-handedly
unfortunately.
beat the entire team. They also combined
Yeah.
for 33 disposals, which is really strong considering it's that's a forward line.
Exactly.
Their key midfielders in Sam Flanders, Chuck Miller, and Noah Anderson all scored above 25. Debutant Tigers, Seth Campbell. Yeah, disposals. I mean, it could have been 25 hitouts each. See short men in doing the rock.
Oh, just saying, like they didn't score 25 points.
No.
That's what I'm saying.
Debutant Tigers, Seth Campbell scored 2 goals on his debut, and I think he's going to be a really good player to keep an eye on over his career.
Oh, the highlight of the what you want to see in a game like that for Richmond.
Yeah, like you may lose and you may lose hard, but you want to get that experience into your young players.
Yeah, the small things.
Jaden Short was our captain because Nankervis is still out, and Short is now part of our leadership group as a vice captain. He also returned to halfback, as we mentioned last week from the practice match, and he finished with 23 disposals and ran out the game with 643 meters gained, which was the most in the entire 26-player list.
That was for both teams.
Yeah. Shea Bolton scored 3 goals. He's still trying to, break out in terms of a midfield role, but I think he's still got, goal kicking ability that's going to be really, really important carrying on. Especially when we need to rely more on our small forwards and not our talls, considering we have too much reliance on Tom Lynch.
Yeah.
And we're still working on figuring out how Noah Bolter is able to stay deep forward and be that marking forward that we need, because he's being pulled too far up the ground. And Kaczynski is still learning the Richmond way, because he was not very prevalent this week.
No. It was it was pretty, I want to say, I mean, obviously the forward line has a few issues, but I think the biggest takeaway for Richmond, sorry to bring it back to negativity, but it was just overall defense.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it was not just the back line, because obviously they just let in way too many marks inside 50s, which led Gold Coast to kick a massive score. But also the midfield group, they just really allowed Gold Coast to do what they want for the vast majority of the game. And
they just didn't touch Matt Rowell. Matt Rowell did everything. They just didn't touch him.
I mean, you say that, but, as I said, it's like, it's like Rowell also was leading the tackles, So not only was he getting the ball, like when he didn't have the ball,
he was trying to get the ball.
He was a one. Exactly. And, as he said, like with them being able to get the ball so much, you'd probably want a bit more pressure being provided by Richmond
Mm.
to make up for the fact that they just couldn't. Sort of just the outpaced, outclassed, and yeah, as I said, the biggest positive was being able to rope up in what was looking to be a massacre by halftime.
Yeah, we at least we caught up a little bit, but it's still not. It's not what you want to see. But
Yeah,
we're also
exactly.
kind of in the middle of a rebuild, so it's like, what more can you really ask for?
Yeah, and I think yeah, as I said, and you would think, maybe this is just what we'll look at the end of the year, where maybe Gold Coast actually does play up a bit more than what we might expect, and
Hmm.
maybe this wasn't as bad. But yeah, for two teams that probably should be around each other, it was just yeah, it was sort of disheartening. But as I said, like yeah, they'll be able to hopefully retool, and again, new coach, they'll be needing to figure out a few things. So you can't really judge them on the first match, but as for the flip side, I think the Suns are probably hoping that this isn't just like the just them playing a bad defense, and they want that King Roses Lacocious forward line to consistently produce for the entire year, because that would just make them from a midfield threat to a full on
Team threat.
attacking threat. As I said, yeah, as I said, um, so yeah,
No, I agree. It's just yeah, just if Gold Coast can strengthen up their backline a little, I think they'd be a much better team that
yeah.
we have than we have them on paper for.
Exactly, and as said, one person who was promising, Alex Exton,
Yep,
again continued
always.
on into his new role, and yeah, getting a lot of disposal as well. It wasn't just his marking presence; it was his ability to work the ball in transition as well. And yeah,
I was
overall, it's just
no, go on.
the breadth. I was going to say the breadth of effort by the Gold Coast Suns was probably one of the more pleasing things. It didn't really look to have too many people sit on the back seat.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think everyone on their team stood up, whilst we had too many passengers on the other side. Although
Yeah, as I
I
said, it
was,
was just
impressed as always by, Nick Floston, Daniel Rioli, and Jaden Short, our
yeah,
players off of halfback who always have strong running, carrying, good intercepts. It just wasn't enough from the rest of the team to be able to.
yeah, especially in that forward line when you had Rioli, Kaczynski, and Ryan all probably having next to no impact on the game.
Well, Ryan was subbed out
Uh,
after halftime, so there you go.
Yeah, well, exactly. But that was something that just didn't work out with the whole structure, let's
No.
say.
Shall we move on to GWS and Collingwood?
Absolutely. In what was most people predicted to be the marquee game of the round, and in most respect it was. It was very interesting, but one of the more surprising things was how much GWS ran away with it in the end, with a monster attack. 18 goals, 6, 114, defeating Collingwood 11-16, 82 at Sydney Showgrounds, Animal Farm slash Stadium.
Now titled
Before the match,
NG
they had the petting
Stadium.
zoo. Yes, yes, of course. Yeah, I think that actually happened. Beforehand, I just copied the wrong thing. Yes. Yeah, in a forward line, uh, yeah, in a battle of probably what was forward line functionality against them, GWS looked fantastic forward with Callum Brown and Hogan absolutely dominating with it for the tolls. In what was around where a lot of tolls struggled. Obviously, I think GWS and Gold Coast were the two teams where their forwards were firing. Oh, and Carlton, of course.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, Brent Daniels having a very happy birthday and nailing a lot of and sorry, GWS just nailed tough goals. Like they were just on. Like they they definitely, in terms of scoring shots, like obviously they were very similar. It's just GWS were supplementing um their you know key forward goals with some just ridiculous boundary goals and some clutchness.
Yep.
Or on the flip side, Collingwood just looked a bit rushed when they were up forward. And we'll talk about this a bit more, but Johnson and Cox just did not present for Collingwood. Myercheck did fantastic. Bobby Hill popped up in places. They all provide a few goals. And unfortunately, Schultz and Elliott, while they were in the game, just couldn't find the goal face. They prevented a bit. Schultz probably a bit more lively than Elliott. I think Elliott were a bit more off the pace.
No, I agree.
But yeah, as I said, to their credit, it's not like Collingwood just gave up. Their forward line pressure was fantastic, and they were able to generate a lot of shots on goals just through pressure, but unfortunately, just not enough really went through for them to make it close. Um, and it was also a bit of an interesting. Well, it was not only just an interesting ruck battle, but midfield battle where, Cameron did well, had a lot of hit outs, and was probably one of Collingwood's best player. But Briggs, when he did get his hand on the ball, was able to find the midfield for the Giants. He had an absolute field day. Pretty
Absolutely.
much of old GWS's leaders stood up. In the midfield, you had, of course, Kelly, Caniglio, and Green.
Lockie Whitfield as
Um,
well.
yeah, he was, of course, more of the rebounder, but had absolute hands on the ball. Yeah, and there are other leaders. Sam Taylor down back, still continuing good form. And Green was shut down pretty well by Maynard, but when he did, he was, like a lot of the GWS forwards, just finding ways to get scoring shots from his limited disposal. Um, the biggest thing for GWS is obviously the injury to Callum Ward.
Yep.
Um,
Another
you
shoulder
know,
injury.
in from a McCreary tackle, he will probably elect to undergo surgery. From the sounds of things, he'll miss a good portion of the season, up to 10. And yeah, it's not a player that you would have expected to play the majority of the 22 anyway, but just for a leadership standpoint, it does suck because they're still a young team.
Mm-hmm.
They'll use his wisdom to try and get that first premiership if they do run deep into the finals. So yeah, they're hoping that he might come back around that time frame. But yeah, it's just a bit of a blow. And yeah, on the flip side, Collingwood, I think one of the other big things for them was, and a bit of a surprise too, they could not get the ball outside their defensive 50. And their defense suffered a bit, They were just normally pretty solid, but they were just dominated by some pretty good performances.
Yep.
And yeah, they just need a bit of retooling, really. They should be able to do it. But definitely in this first round, there's a few question marks. They definitely want to make sure that they can adjust and it not be the cursed premiership hangover that seems to get most teams. But, it's definitely a lot for Craig McRae to think about.
Oh yeah, for sure. I do want to touch on the Dacos boys because despite
Oh, yeah.
Collingwood, losing and losing pretty convincingly, they looked
Mm,
incredible as they always do. They
incredible.
combined
And,
for
as I
62
said,
disposals, 13 clearances, and 13 inside 50s.
yeah. And if you look at it, the midfield battle, like, it wasn't really won by anyone. Like, Collingwood have enough passage of play. It was about, I think, 43% roughly each in terms of time of possession.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's
they
right.
really, and it was pretty broad. Like, Lipinski had his hands on the ball a few times. And as you said, it's just, yeah, it was more so at either ends. GWS were just clinical in what they wanted to do, and Collingwood just they needed tinkering more than they were playing badly, I think. And against a team that were just on fire like GWS, they really made the most of it. And I did write some limelight players, and I sort of cheated a bit. I just wrote Dacos because I had two for Collingwood, two for GWS, but the Dacos counts for both.
Yeah,
Like
I figure
both
it
Josh
would.
and Nick were clinical. I think Myercheck really performed well for how bad Collingwood's forward structure was at times.
Mhm.
Like, he was definitely the most threatening. And, as I said, when you had two of your forwards, that you really needed a couple of more marks inside 50 from, as I said, in Ash Johnson and Mason Cox,
Yeah.
Myercheck really stepped up when, and really kept them in it when they probably could have been thrashed. And
Yeah.
on the flip side, the star-studded Josh Kelly and Tom Green were fantastic.
Absolutely.
Um, just, as I said, the midfield wasn't won by any particular team, but what Kelly and Green were able to do with the ball when they got it in their hands was, just a step up. Lots of scoring involvement, lots of clearances, and just provide that extra class and brought the ball inside 50 to where, as I said, some of the players were picking up, like a spotlight player, Callum Brown. Fantastic.
Yeah.
He's the sort of player that needs a big game, especially when Riccardi didn't really show much.
Yeah, Riccardi was really quiet
Because the
this
other,
week.
yeah, he was actually probably, like as I say, we'll talk about Cox and Johnson in a second because obviously there was a bit of news behind Cox, but I mean, I think Johnson was the worst, but I would say, Riccardi was probably the second worst tall forward playing in that match. And, maybe for the round as well. It was a bit disappointing. Um, and yeah, for Collingwood, probably a bit harsh calling him a spotlight player. Darcy Cameron, not quite elite, but definitely had a very imposing game. And Bo McCreary, I thought, even though obviously scoring wasn't on his card for that night,
Hmm.
he did score a nice goal. His forward tackling was immense, and he definitely, put the pressure while their forward line wasn't functioning. It wasn't easy getting the ball out there for GWS, and his speed and tackling effort was a big part of that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I completely agree with all that.
And to wrap it all off and looking a bit into Collingwood's future, although I don't think they have too much to worry about apart from a bit of tinkering. I do think they will have to make a dropping. And, as I said, it's really one of those things where, and if you haven't heard, Cox, before the match and to the lead up, he was talking a lot to GWS Twitter account, firing shots and a bit, adding to a rivalry, which probably did lead to a lot of ticket sales, did lead to a lot of hype behind the match. And I'm not saying that that's a bad
I
thing,
mean, both the teams
but
match up against each
unfortunately,
other really well.
yeah. But it was just that brain dead moment of before the centre bounce in the team practice, going up to Mumford, putting hands on him, not in a bad way, like just, he was trying to be cheeky, just take the ball up when they were practicing ruck setup. But it was really just one of the moments where you just ask why
It's
sometimes.
it's
Like,
it's just an asshole move. There was no reason for it.
there was no reason for it. Like, maybe if Mumford and Cox had a bit of personal history, like you might have seen it in a lighter thing, it was just, you know, but yeah, as I said, they were just so bemused by that. It didn't really add much. And, sometimes I think you can get a bit carried away. You don't want to go full Kane Corns and say players aren't allowed to have a bit of fun. But I think what you're asking about McRae is like, you go ahead and do that, and then you just don't offer anything in terms of, even impact in contests.
Hmm.
It's not like Mason Cox, didn't mark the ball but brought it to ground. He really didn't have any impact until he was brought into the ruck. But again, Collingwood aren't really looking for that, ruck support. They need tall forward goals. And when McRae's looking at the list sheet, as bad as Ash Johnson work it was, it might be that message where you need to send saying, hey, we need a bit more of a serious effort. And, going and doing that is just not on. And, as I said, he'll get the fine, whatever it is. Well, you hope he would anyway, because he can't get touching opposition playing staff. That's just the AFL should just have no time for that,
Yeah, I agree.
unless there's like some, like I said, if they were both players in their heyday and they were known friends and there was reciprocated, maybe you let them off. But yeah, as I said, you just got to stamp that out. And yeah, as I said, like you don't want to lump too much on him. As I said, like he's an easy target, and I think when he is firing, he
Sure.
can provide a lot to Collingwood's forward line. And for structure, they just need his sort of player. But yeah, you really early on in the season, it might be the time to really say, hey, that's not on. We need you to go to the reserves and prove that you've got what it takes to provide consistent effort and contest because you're just not showing it at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. He was really, really lackluster, and it's something like considering you had just won a premiership, you don't really want to go
Yeah,
into your very next game for points looking like that.
yeah. And, as I said, maybe in the woodworks, we might be seeing the AFL coast to coast return of Big Billy Frampton in the forward line.
Oh,
Maybe that's someone who they can turn to just for a bit of difference.
would be a
Early on the
spicy
year,
inclusion.
it would be spicy, but I want to see it because it was just nothing. And at least, as I said, if anything, maybe they just have the defensive forward, because they had generation from their small forwards. Like they didn't have any
They
problems with
did.
scoring shots. So, maybe just retool your defense forward line a bit like that because, as I said, it's not like he was a reason they lost the grand final. You would say as a role player, he did pretty well, and it might just be the way Collingwood have to shape up going forward. It won't be the prettiest on team sheet. It would be seen as a bit risky, but I would definitely be considering it if I was Craig McRae. Like you want to, like Craig McRae said at the start that it was a fresh year. The premiership was behind him.
Yep.
So as I said, if you're looking for a year, if you're looking at that blank slate and saying, "Hey, our forward iron hasn't proven anything yet," bring in Big Billy. That's what I'm saying. Lock of the week, spicy cold, but bring him in. I want to
You
see it.
need a player with an X factor, and who knows, maybe he might just have that all of a sudden.
I don't know if it's an X factor, but it's definitely
It's a factor.
we'll call it a Big Billy factor.
The big B
I'm all
factor.
in.
I like it. I
Yeah,
like
Big
it.
B.
So
Yeah. So
now that we're
Craig McRae, if you're listening,
yeah,
uh, do
sure.
that. Sure. Yeah.
Now, now that that's all done and dusted in the opening round, overall thoughts, opinions? Is it something that we need to keep going forward?
Um,
Is it just like an AFLX thing where it's a one and done?
I want it to be a one and done. I didn't overly enjoy it, but I think what the AFL needs to do is go, hey, we did something great here with bringing football to Sydney, especially while teams are going good. And if both teams make the final next year, give them the marquee games. Like it really felt like they had a certain energy there
Mhm.
that they do want to continue with. I think that will be the big success. Like there will be a few memberships created from that round, which they want. But in terms of the viewing experience, especially from other state teams, it was just a bit lackluster. And yeah, as I said, especially, as I said, Channel 7 had most games. And unfortunately, with that, the commentary as well, as I said, having to listen to Collingwood and GWS with some pretty
Pretty biased
awful, let's
commentary.
put it, Brian Taylor,
Yeah.
Brian Taylor commentary. I'm not one to go after him, but it's really just, it was a game that most people wanted to sit back and watch, and just hearing him just as I said, like GWS, they wanted excitement around it, and all they could do was harp on about Collingwood possibly getting into it when it just wasn't their night.
Yeah, I
And it
agree.
was a real shame because, they were so clinical and excitable that you really wanted them to be gassed up because, yeah, they were fantastic.
Well, there's, licensing and contracts. There's not much more you can do when it comes to the
Oh,
broadcast side of
it's good that was
things.
on free to wear. Like only one game, obviously, the Richmond and Carlton,
Like
Richmond and
Gold
Gold
Coast.
Coast game wasn't on free to wear, so
It
it was
never
good in that
it
respect.
never usually is. It's always
No,
our game against
yeah.
Gold Coast is never on free to wear.
It was just good that at least it was accessible. if not, a bit lackluster.
Shall we move on to discussions about round one games and any
Yes,
key ones that we
yes.
want to talk about?
Yeah, as I said, I think the first ones are fairly good to talk about. The old classic opening round, opening game.
Opening
Still the
game.
first game of round one.
Yeah, it's the traditional
Uh,
spot where it always should be. Thursday night, Carlton v
mm,
Richmond.
mm,
Carlton
yeah.
obviously lose Sam Doherty to an ACL, but Jesse Motlop will be back from injury. I expect him
Yep.
to probably be in the starting 22 straight away.
Oh,
Richmond should
absolutely.
regain Nankervis, Dustin Mutton, and Ryan Mansell will be back from injury. I don't think Lynch is ready yet. Probably at least another week or two, which is going
You
to
don't want to
hurt.
rush him.
But no, you don't want to rush
It,
him.
yeah. As I said,
Um,
like you're looking at long term for Richmond, and yeah, just having him provide support to some of the younger players is enough for him this season.
yeah, I agree. Um, Pretty much from what we've seen so far, Richmond need to work on their early work rate in the midfield because that's where they were beaten
Mhm.
against the Suns, and obviously their accuracy. But that's kind of like that ends up kind of just being like a league wide issue because everyone's bad
Yeah,
sometimes.
especially opening round. You don't want to go too harsh on teams being inaccurate, but there definitely was a lot of missed opportunities.
Absolutely. Carlton will be trying to ride their high from beating Brisbane up at the Gabba, and they're going to
Yeah,
try. They just want to keep their strong form going into Thursday night. They're on
they
a
do.
6-day break, whereas we're only on a 5-day break,
Mm,
which is why Dusty and Nank didn't play against the Suns because it's
yeah,
such a small gap, and they're just coming back from injuries and such.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah, I think this
yeah,
is the one where Richmond's defense is really going to put to the test, and that's not just literal back six; that's midfield defense too.
yeah,
Um, Obviously, they struggled against a pretty good Gold Coast forward line and an excellent um, Gold Coast midfield. Where this week they might be facing an excellent in both account with Carlton's forward line and Carlton's midfield, both contested, as you said, Jesse Motlop back, providing maybe a bit more spark by the forwards that wasn't quite there with last game. And yeah, as I said, don't think it will be likely that they'll win. I think, yeah, as I said, overall 4 quarter effort though probably could see a bit more. Um, yeah, as I said, it's just adding on week to week by for Carlton,
yeah,
Carlton Richmond.
yeah. I agree. What is your tip for this week? And we'll probably go through
Carlton
all of
by
your tips
23.
since you've already done all
Yeah,
of your
yeah,
tips.
exactly. Well, I haven't put him in. I didn't do any sneaky changes, but yeah, as I said, Carlton by 23. I think, yeah, Richmond's defense will be exposed.
Yep.
I think it might be a bit more contested, especially with both teams tired. I think that will suit Richmond. I don't think they'll like the free flowing. Um, you know, like I said, I don't think they'll match up too well against a free flowing team, so they can get the ball to a contest. They're definitely hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
They've definitely got enough people who can lock the ball up in their back line. But yeah, as I said, it's just, and the only real issue for Carlton is just retooling with Doherty out. Weathering's still probably not going to play. Um, yeah, and Richmond might be the team that they might settle against, see where they're at.
Yeah, I think it's a good. I mean, it's always a good fight between Carlton and Richmond, so I assume it'll be a good measuring point for them.
Exactly. You would expect Carlton to win. I don't think Richmond will just roll over, especially not early in the season.
No. Um, Sydney Collingwood, I believe, is the next one on the list.
Another big game at the G. And yeah, it's just a few questions. It's, a bit, was Collingwood's efforts at either end win their forward line and defence, a bit of a blip? Or will it just be a slow start to the season? Um, I think, can Sydney's tolls provide a bit more for the whole game? And, as I said, like I touched on earlier, with Cox maybe being dropped or Johnson,
Mm-hmm.
likely one of them, does Amadi still get a game? Because he just, again, it was presenting like McDonald, McLean, as I said, didn't always find the ball, but they at least made the contest most times. And, Amadi's got a bit of that speed, which is good for them. But yeah, as I said, they might be looking to retool. And yeah, as I said, both teams transition well. And it's which style will be able to convert into actual score, I think, is the main takeaway from that game. Because both can. Both got reasonable defenses. Sydney probably looking to prove a bit more than Collingwood. But yeah, and it's also interesting because Collingwood nullifies teams with strong tackling presence and obviously midfield dominance. And Sydney sort of prevents in a sort of different way. They control a lot of the marking contest, force teams not to get that uncontested possession. So maybe a few more chains from Collingwood might be stopped with Sydney. So, I'll be interested to see which has more impact. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
That is a good question. I think Collingwood's midfield might be a little bit stronger than theirs, especially with
Yeah,
both the Dacos boys. Um, and
exactly.
but I think
Again,
it's gonna be a forward
we were
backline
saying that
battle.
last week.
Yeah, I know we were.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
it's, yeah,
I think Grundy um probably dominate the midfield. No, hang on, sorry.
it's,
Yeah, no, I think Grundy will dominate the midfield. But I also think no, sorry, not midfield, the ruck. I am
yeah,
losing
the
my
rock.
mind.
It's all good.
I think Grundy will
I'm,
dominate the ruck, but I think it's all gonna be a forward backline battle. I think Sydney's forwards are really good, but I think Collingwood's backline will step up. They will have learned
yeah,
from last week's
I,
game.
I think, yeah, as I said, it's not so much that they were incapable of defending. It was just more efforts and structure that need retooling. And I think it's guaranteed both teams will have time of dominance.
Mm.
And I think it might be a very swingy game, because as I said, both teams like to do their, both teams like to execute their game plan on their terms. But yeah, as I said, both just go slightly different ways about it, and it'll be very interesting. Um, Actually, tip Collingwood to rebound, mainly just because it's at the G, 4 points in it.
Yeah,
It'll be very impressive if Sydney win. Like, I think it would be a statement win. It's not off the cards, but I think you just got to back the reigning premiers more than anything.
yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. They'll have a hard. I think they'll bounce back pretty convincingly, and if not, it'll be super super close.
Yeah. I really don't see it being a huge margin or a team running away with it. If anything, I see Sydney more likely to run away with the match. Obviously, if Collingwood's problems are, a bit more long term than we think. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think at their peak, there's just a really good match.
Do you want to briefly touch on any of the less notable games?
Yeah, I think we'll just briefly go through the next couple because they're not quite as interesting. The early Saturday games, we've got Essendon at Hawks at the G.
Yep.
Um, I think what we want to see there is both teams trying to create an identity for their 2024
Full campaign.
campaign,
Yeah.
lots of new players coming in from both injuries and trades. And I think Essendon as well, this could be a chance for them to set up their attack from a pretty depleted Hawks defense. And on the flip side, Hawthorn, if they are going to be a bit more attacking, Essendon are a team that will let you get hands on the ball. And yeah, just see what they sort of want to set up. Going to tip Essendon by 20. It might be one of those like third quarter fadeaway sort of thing for Hawthorn. Hopefully at the start of the season it should be close for most of the match. But yeah, I just got Essendon moderately comfortably getting away with it.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with that. GWS and
Yeah,
North. Do you think it's just going to be a bloodbath?
it's hard to see it not. As I said, I wrote in, my creativity, I wrote Joey's to the slaughters, can the baby ruse do anything coming off what appears to be just a very potent attacking team.
And considering North's
And
defense is already as weak as it is,
babies, absolutely. It's going to be tough. Um, the only way I think North will be able to defend well is if their midfield steps up, makes it a bit more contested.
yeah.
And obviously they do have a few good young midfielders, so it's really about the opportunities. I don't think they'll have too much chance to put the game on their terms. But when North do get the ball, if they can make it scrappy and their midfields and forwards can make a few opportunities, obviously Nick Larkey being the main centerpiece and, their midfield.
Harry Sheezel and
Core.
George Wardlaw being able to trying to
Oh,
twist
I
the
was
game onto
thinking
their
more
own terms.
Wardlaw. He's looking to be a pretty tough player. He's one that can maybe mitigate a bit of GWS powerfulness, I suppose. But yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle for sure.
No,
I'll put GWS by 40. That might be generous.
That might be generous.
I hope they're able to not just be smashed.
Well, I mean, out of the games coming out of this week, this is probably the game that will probably have the biggest margin and put them on top.
Margin, yeah, you would have to see it. But yeah, not really much to say about it, really.
No, it's one of the less notable games. Geelong and St Kilda
at Goomba, they get to play at their real home.
I call it Shoebox Stadium because it's very small.
I mean, it is. I prefer Goomba just because it sounds like Goomba from Mario.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah.
There isn't really much to say about this one. We just hope it's going to be a tight contest, kind of show us where each team is going to be.
It's one of those things where it is interesting, but it's really hard to pinpoint any of these because Geelong, obviously, lots of small losses at last year, probably a bit unlucky not to win as much. The Saints did win a bit more, but obviously had that big problem with their forward line. But I think the more interesting thing is seeing, again, a bit of the midfield battle, but more on the outside. You got the Saints, very fast team.
Yeah.
Added Liam Henry to their mix. They should be looking to outspeed the Cats, who do have some fast players, but they tend to be, fairly younger. You're talking about like Oyson Mullen,
Max Holmes.
And yeah, as I said, Max Holmes. Thank you. I was trying to think of the other outsider, but so it's sort of like, can the Cats veterans do enough to cover their iffy depth? And on the flip side, can the Saints make the most of their inside 50s, which I think they might be able to get a bit more than the Cats. Again, just because it's at Goomba, I've got Geelong by 9. I'm very uncertain about this game. It's probably interesting to watch. But yeah, as I said, I don't know. It's the one where, whatever the result, I don't think you'll take too much. Like, I don't think it'll give that much clarity to where each team stands.
No, yeah, I agree. I think it's just going to be a hard-fought game.
Yeah, a good one for the supporters to get excited about. And, probably going to be a bit outshone by what should be a fairly attacking game in the late Saturday game, Suns versus Adelaide. But, it should provide a bit of good football there.
Gold Coast Suns versus the Adelaide Crows. And I just want to make a quick note before you go through this, is that I just brought up the ladder on this on the YouTube video, and the Gold Coast Suns are currently sitting top of the ladder.
Yep.
For the first time in history. It's not going to last very long, but you never know.
I mean, you never know. Like, as I said, there'll be one of the few teams to have played 2 games. Which I think points overrides percentage. Like, so,
yes.
Yeah. So they technically probably looking to be the most. Obviously GWS probably you would think would get the percentage up. But yeah. think the most exciting thing about this is the prospect of a high-scoring shootout. Again, Adelaide, obviously one of the most scoring teams of 2023, but they've still got a few issues on defense. And yeah, the Suns obviously took advantage of the slightly weakened defense in Richmond. Are we wanting to do the same? And yeah, it's also, a good chance for the Crows to prove themselves as a team that can win the tough games away. Suns very early in the season's probably one of the worst times to face them. It'll be a good win if they do. But obviously, on the flip side, the Suns will be looking to keep that midfield dominance.
Yep.
And
especially with this being played at home.
Exactly. They want to make the newly crowned People's First Stadium, a bit of a fortress for them, if they are to make the first finals appearance for them. We'll say for the Crows, their forward line too, it'll be interesting to see how they not move away from Tex, but definitely work their forward line with Riley Thilthorpe missing. See what they can do to, start to balance their forward line a bit, which they need to do this season. Because you would assume Tex doesn't play another 20-plus game season. Hasn't done that back-to-back for a while.
No, it's probably going to be lesser games. So I think they're traveling a little bit more this season.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I'll keep the optimism with Adelaide. I'll tip the Crows by 15. But yeah, as I said, that 15 points might be a bit closer than it seems, because it could be like a 115 versus 100 type game with both teams getting a bit of their own game style running.
Time for Super Sunday. We start at the MCG with Melbourne and the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Which is,
I'll let you go, but
I think
it
it's a
will
really
be a very
interesting
interesting
matchup.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a battle that's going to be fought in the midfield, 100%.
You got some really great matchups there. Bomb versus Petrarca, Gorn versus English, Libba versus Viney.
You'll have Christian Salem now thrown into there since he's no longer on half-back.
Yeah, Christian Saylor, Clayton Oliver, and obviously still got McRae and
JJ.
Not Adams. JJ.
Taylor.
Treloar.
That one.
That's what I'm thinking.
His first name is Adam. That's where the confusion is.
Yeah. Well, both very similar. Play for GWS, Collingwood, and another team.
Yeah. No, it's it's probably also going to be fought in the back line, because you look at how Stephen May performed last week, and he's probably got the best body to go up against their forward line.
Yeah, which is, it's sort of thing is like both defenses want to prove themselves. And it's sort of like the forward lines are too, but it's like, both the forward lines are shaky, wanting to rebound from a, very mid 2023 campaign. And I think, the defenses are, Melbourne's already formed. They just need to retool. And the Bulldogs are looking to shape up in that department. They look to have the core there. And they want to tie it a bit more together for the whole 2024 seasons, because they've got enough good players down there to be a bit tighter, especially against Melbourne. Probably a good team to start against, because, as I said, they didn't look that great. Again, very poor inside 50 conversion rate. So, the Bulldogs can definitely set it up from there. And, as I said, get the ball to their midfields who are very damaging.
Yep, I completely agree. Shall we quickly move on? Do you want to talk about anything else with that game?
Not really. I think it should be close. I got the Bulldogs by 3. I think the pain for Melbourne might be a bit, early on, but who knows? Bulldogs can be almost anything at any given time. So we'll see how they come out, but yeah, I'll look to shape them in.
All right, sounds good. Briefly touch on Port v West Coast. There isn't going to be much to say on this one.
Mm, yeah, the only other game that could probably compete with the blowout for GWS and North, especially the last two games. Port got 54 scoring shots to 31,
Yeah.
and the Eagles just had pretty much lanes open up for Port to dominate. And when Port can get their game up and going, we've seen that in countless seasons. They will smash bottom sides. Um, Obviously, on the injury front for West Coast, they got a lot of players still out. Cully, Edwards, Flynn's, Hewitt, Ryan, Sheed are probably the main ones out of their probable best 22 that won't feature. So yeah, they're looking a bit shaky to start the season. I don't think there's too much optimism for the opening round. But yeah, a bit of bad news for Port, and what might help the Eagles out is Ollie Lord being sidelined with a fractured, bruised tibia. He'll
Oh,
miss 10 weeks and won't feature for the first half of the season. But
that's pretty rough.
yeah, it's really just, yeah, how do Eagles not let Port play on their own terms? You know, where Port have a lot of good bowl winners. When they do what they want, they score very quickly.
Hmm.
You know, it's just how do they mitigate while also still playing a bit of their own brand? Because, you know, Simpson's obviously not a coach that will go full mitigation. Like even last year, they play a bit on their own terms, even if it does mean conceding a bit more points. But yeah, it's just one of those games, especially at Adelaide Oval, where it could be very ugly. I got Port by 43 points,
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, there's
which
another big margin game
might
right
be
there.
actually more. Yeah, I did technically tip him a bit more than GWS, but honestly, either or, flip a coin to who has the biggest margin, but both would be prime contenders.
All right, last game to look at is Freo and Brisbane over at Optus Stadium.
Hmm. Um, yeah. Um, I think the main thing for Fremantle is how to stop the bullying from the center of the ground from Freo.
Yeah.
Like it's not like Brisbane weren't be able to impose their game style um, last round. It's just obviously moments and conversion that failed them. Um, yeah, we touched on it briefly before, but the replacement of Kitty Coleman, you know, as I said, you want to be able to find a bit of pace from that halfback line, especially to Freo, who, you know, probably looking to at least be able to bring the ball to ground with their tall forwards.
Mhm.
You know, they want Michael Walters to be able to provide a bit, and yeah, as I said, and it's they probably want to actually look on capitalizing on what's a bit of a shaky Lions defense. Not that great last year. Obviously, led a lot of goals, especially to the tall forwards. Come in the Carlton game, so it's yeah, it's one of those things where I don't think Dockers are a huge chance to win, but I think it'll be close. I think yeah, Dockers again. If you make it contested, if you are you know, able to at least provide a solid defense, which they can defend Toll pretty well. You know, with Cox, Ryan, Pierce, they match up quite well against Brisbane Toll forwards. So I got Brisbane by only 8. I don't think there'll be much in it by the final siren, but I'd be surprised if Fremantle win at the same time. Be hard to
Yeah,
see Brisbane going to.
you'd like to expect Brisbane to win that matchup, but Freo,
Yeah.
provided they have their players in the right spots and play as effectively as they can, it would make it pretty close.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's definitely how much can Frio, you know, because you see this with Frio at times last year where they fantastic on the clearances, but then one or two players get a bench. Obviously, mainly Brayshaw just defensively, but
Yeah,
even Sarong at times. And they just get smashed for a while. So, you know, obviously Darcy, you know, playing is a huge factor in that as well. And it'd be very interesting to see if he can dominate McInerney. He can be very clever. He's a very useful player. Um, but yeah, it's probably going to be Brisbane just creating a few more of their opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. That about does it for us on the round
Yeah.
one analysis. So shall we move on to what are we up to for the rest of the week?
Yep. Well, I'll be finishing off house sitting, returning to my abode back into the eastern side of WA, and yeah, looking forward to another round of football, sorting things out. Later today, I'm actually going to make a post on Reddit. I'm doing the team preview for Port Adelaide as part of the subreddit there. So if you want to read a bit more about Port's season's prospects, I'll be doing a bit of writing and post that up a bit later today. And yeah, other than that, you know, do a few things with my friends. I stream with a friend on Thursday normally, play a bit of Mario Kart, talk about random stuff. As if you think I couldn't talk anymore, I have a bit more spotlight there. So yeah, it's looking good for me, hopefully. Oh, and I go to a concert on tomorrow,
Oh
which
yeah?
is good.
Who are you seeing?
Yeah, just yeah, one of the indie bands, Black Country New Roads. Apparently very fantastic live at a venue just north of Perth called the Rechabite. Very fancy. It's got like one of those hipsterish restaurants attached to it.
Oh
Only
yeah.
opens at midnight, um, that sort of thing. It's a very modern venue. Um, yeah, Perth's got a few good venues, and the Rechabite's kind of got a cathedraly uh, look about it too. It's a very nice venue to go to, and I'm very looking forward to seeing them there tomorrow night.
Sounds pretty cool. Um, for me, it's mostly just work. You know, I don't do anything else. I'm considering
The
going
grind.
to going Thursday night. I it being a Carlton home game, I don't technically have a ticket, so that's why I'm only still
Mm.
considering it for the time being. First because I really miss the footy and I just really want to go to a game.
Yeah, it's always good.
So that's mostly my consideration. Otherwise, this is work, catching up on the other games throughout the week, um, or the weekend, I should say. And that's pretty much it. There isn't much more to it.
Yeah.
So I think we leave it there for this week. Thank you all
Hmm.
so very much for coming to join us. Be sure to check out all of our socials down below. Give us a follow. Give the Spotify and the YouTube video a like or a rating, and leave a comment. Leave us some
Hmm.
feedback. We appreciate it very much. And
Hmm.
hopefully, we will see you all next Wednesday, because that's when these get uploaded. Wednesday at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Australian Eastern Daylight Time, because Melbourne, we're still dealing with daylight savings. Don't mind us. That will change
Mm.
once daylight savings is over. Look,
Killing your curtains 1 week at a time, I swear.
I mean, look at them. They're just so bright out there. Granted, it's still
Uh,
only 5 o'clock, but you know.
yeah.
Anyway, thank you all so much, and we will see you all next week. Goodbye.